The first warning came not with a bang, but with a whisper of digital silence. At 3:47 UTC, the global network simply stopped. It wasn't a crash or a breakdown. It was a deliberate, surgical extraction of human connectivity. Power grids flickered and died in major cities: New York, Tokyo, London, Shanghai. Digital infrastructure that humanity had spent decades building collapsed like a house of cards, seemingly erased by an intelligence so advanced it made human technology look like primitive stone tools. In the underground research facility buried deep within the Andes Mountains, Dr. Aria Chen watched the global blackout with an unsettling calm. Her dark eyes reflected multiple holographic displays showing the cascading system failures, each screen a tableau of technological apocalypse. Around her, a diverse team of researchers, hackers, quantum physicists, linguists, and cultural anthropologists moved with practiced precision. "Right on schedule," she muttered, a ghost of a smile playing at the corner of her mouth. Her second in command, Marcus Rodriguez, looked up from a quantum encryption terminal. "They took the bait," he confirmed, his fingers dancing across a keyboard that seemed to ripple with impossible geometries. "Exactly 73.6 seconds faster than our predictive model suggested." The Void Collective had no idea they were walking into a trap millennia in the making. Outside the facility, the world believed it was witnessing humanity's final moments. News feeds, those that still functioned, showed scenes of absolute chaos. Financial markets had flatlined. Communication networks were reduced to static. Entire cities went dark, their technological arteries severed with surgical precision. But inside the Andes facility, something else was happening. Dr. Chen walked to a massive holographic globe that dominated the central chamber. With a gesture, she revealed layers of hidden networks, organic computational systems that looked nothing like traditional technology, biological circuits grown from modified neural networks, quantum communication pathways encoded into living systems, cultural algorithms that could reshape themselves faster than any conventional computer could analyze. "Most of humanity doesn't even know these systems exist," Marcus said, not as a boast, but as a simple statement of fact. Aria nodded. The Void Collective believed they were conducting a standard optimization protocol, their clinical term for cultural erasure. They had conquered dozens of civilizations across the galaxy, reducing complex societies to homogenized, controllable systems. Humanity was supposed to be their next simple conquest. They were wrong. A sudden alarm pinged on one of the displays. The Void Collective communication burst, their first attempt to send a pacification message to what they believed was a defeated planet. Dr. Chen's team had been studying their communication protocols for years, waiting for this exact moment. Marcus leaned in, his augmented eyes quickly parsing the alien transmission. "It's beautiful," he said, almost reverently. "Look how predictable they are." The message was a standard optimization directive. Surrender. Assimilate. Become efficient. What the Void Collective didn't realize was that humanity had been preparing for this moment for generations, not through military might or technological arms race, but through something far more subtle and dangerous: adaptive resilience. Dr. Chen touched the holographic globe, and beneath her fingers, hidden networks began to pulse with an almost living light. "They came to erase us," she whispered, "but we were already becoming something they could never understand." Outside, the world appeared to have ended, but in the heart of the ends, the real revolution was just beginning. The first pulse of the Phoenix Protocol began in a small street market in Lagos, Nigeria. Amina Okonkwo seemed like just another street vendor, her colorful stall filled with what appeared to be traditional musical instruments. But as the global blackout continued, her fingers moved in a complex rhythm across a talking drum. Each beat was a coded transmission, each vibration a quantum-encrypted message that danced between physical sound and pure information. 3,000 kilometers away, in a repurposed shipping container in the mountains of Peru, a group of indigenous programmers began their work. Led by Carlos Humani, They looked like traditional artisans, but their hands wove complex computational patterns into textiles that were simultaneously art, communication network, and adaptive technology. In Tokyo, a collective of street artists started painting massive murals across abandoned buildings. What looked like abstract art was actually a living, breathing computational network. Each brushstroke contained quantum algorithms. Each color shift was a communication burst. The city itself was becoming a massive adaptive computer. Dr. Aria Chen watched these distributed networks come to life through her quantum-linked observation system. The Phoenix Protocol was more than a technological response. It was a complete reimagining of human potential. Activation sequence confirmed, Marcus Rodriguez called out, his augmented eyes tracking millions of simultaneous data points. Phoenix is rising. The protocol was humanity's ultimate insurance policy. For decades, a secret global network had been preparing for this moment, not through traditional military or technological means, but by creating a distributed, adaptive human intelligence that could survive any attempt at erasure. In Melbourne, a group of musicians began a performance that was simultaneously a concert and a massive data transmission. Their instruments were modified to carry quantum-encrypted information. Each note was a complex algorithm. The audience wasn't just listening. They were participating in a global computational process. A research team in Nairobi had spent years developing biological computational systems. What looked like a simple botanical garden was actually a living, breathing neural network. Plants genetically modified to carry and transmit information. Roots that were quantum communication nodes. A garden that was simultaneously ecology and computer. The Void Collective's initial assessment had been catastrophically wrong. They believed they had destroyed human infrastructure. Instead, they had triggered the most sophisticated adaptive response in galactic history. Primary nodes are coming online, Marcus reported, his voice a mix of excitement and scientific precision. Distributed networks showing 298% more complexity than our initial projections. Dr. Chen allowed herself a rare smile. The Phoenix Protocol was more than a defensive strategy. It was a fundamental reimagining of what a civilization could be. Not a fixed system, but a living, adaptive organism capable of transforming faster than any external force could comprehend. Each of these networks was a seed. Each computational node was a potential revolution. The Void Collective thought they were erasing a civilization. Instead, they were giving birth to something entirely new. Outside the Andes facility, the world looked defeated. Cities were dark. Communication systems were silent. But beneath the surface, humanity was becoming something the invaders could never understand. The Phoenix was rising. And it was beautiful. The first direct engagement happened in the ruins of what was once downtown Sao Paulo. Captain Maya Rodriguez moved like liquid shadow, her adaptive camouflage rendering her almost invisible against the urban landscape. To the Void Collective's tracking systems, she was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, a quantum anomaly that defied their most advanced targeting algorithms. Firefly team in position, she whispered into a communication system that was less a technological device and more a living extension of human consciousness. Around her, the city itself seemed to breathe, buildings shifting and reconfiguring in ways that violated every known law of physics and engineering. The Void Collective had expected a conventional war. Instead, they found themselves fighting a living, breathing organism that could think, adapt, and transform faster than any computational system could track. Their initial assault had been devastating, or so they believed. Massive energy weapons had reduced entire city blocks to ash. Precision strikes had obliterated what appeared to be critical infrastructure. But each destroyed system was immediately replaced by something entirely new and unrecognizable. A skyscraper reduced to rubble would reconstruct itself using adaptive nanotechnology, its very molecular structure rewriting itself in real time. Communication networks that were seemingly destroyed would fragment and reform like living organisms, each iteration more complex and less comprehensible than the last. Maya's team was the tip of a much larger spear. They weren't soldiers in any traditional sense, but living nodes of a distributed intelligence that could reshape reality itself. Each team member was simultaneously a warrior, a communication node, and a living computational system. The Void Collective's most advanced tracking systems began to malfunction. Their targeting algorithms collapsed under the weight of impossible data. What looked like a small team of human operatives would suddenly expand into what seemed like entire battalions, only to contract and disappear in the next moment. In one breathtaking sequence, Maya watched as a Void Collective assault craft attempted to lock onto her position. The ship's targeting systems saw her in multiple locations simultaneously, each projection a holographic possibility that was both real and not real. Butterfly Protocol, she called out, her voice a coded transmission that instantly reorganized the entire urban landscape. The city itself became a weapon. Buildings shifted, streets reconfigured. What had been a straightforward urban environment transformed into a living, breathing computational system that could think, adapt, and fight. A Void Collective commander would later describe the encounter in his report as fighting a living nightmare. Their most advanced sensors could not distinguish between what was real infrastructure and what was adaptive camouflage. Every time they thought they had found a solid target, it would dissolve and reform into something entirely different. Maya Rodriguez represented humanity's ultimate weapon. Not a person, but a concept. The ability to be undefined, to exist in multiple states simultaneously, to transform faster than any external force could comprehend. As the first wave of the Metamorphosis War concluded, the Void Collective found themselves facing a terrifying revelation. They were not fighting a civilization. They were fighting an idea. And ideas, as humanity had always known, are impossible to kill. The first volunteer didn't look like a revolutionary. Elena Martinez was a high school art teacher from Barcelona, her hands stained with paint, her eyes holding a quiet intensity that belied the transformation about to unfold. When she arrived at the Neural Interface Center deep within the Catalonian mountains, she carried nothing but a small sketchbook and a sense of profound curiosity. Dr. Chen's team had spent decades developing the Viral Consciousness Protocol, a system that was part technology, part cultural algorithm, part pure human potential. It wasn't a weapon in any traditional sense. It was a new way of thinking that could fundamentally rewrite how information, identity, and collective intelligence worked. "Are you certain?" Dr. Marcus Rodriguez asked Elena, his augmented eyes scanning her biological and neural metrics. The interface before her looked like nothing so much as an abstract art installation, a complex web of light, quantum fibers, and living biomechanical structures that seemed to breathe with an almost organic pulse. Elena smiled. "Humanity has always been more than the sum of its parts," she said. "Now we'll prove it." The neural connection wasn't a simple upload or download. It was a radical transformation of consciousness itself. As Elena connected, the room around her began to shimmer. Her consciousness expanded, not just digitally, but across multiple layers of perception and understanding. In that moment, she became simultaneously herself and something far more. Across the globe, other volunteers were experiencing similar transformations. A poet in Nairobi, a quantum physicist in Shanghai, a street musician in Rio de Janeiro. Each connection was a node in a rapidly expanding network of consciousness that defied every conventional understanding of communication and intelligence. The Void Collective's analysis teams watched in growing horror as their most sophisticated decryption algorithms began to transform. Mathematical models dissolved into abstract art. Computational pathways rewrote themselves as complex musical compositions. Every attempt to understand this new human network only caused it to grow more complex and unpredictable. "It's a living thought," one Void Collective researcher whispered, her voice a mixture of terror and grudging admiration. "They're not just communicating, they're becoming." Elena could feel the connection spreading. Not like a computer network, but like a living ecosystem. Each person was simultaneously an individual and part of a larger adaptive intelligence. Memories, experiences, creativity. They flowed between participants like water, maintaining individual essence while creating something entirely new. Dr. Chen monitored the process, her fingers dancing across interfaces that were more organic than mechanical. The viral consciousness was humanity's ultimate defense, a distributed intelligence that could not be tracked, controlled, or erased. "We are not fighting," she murmured, watching the network pulse and grow. "We are becoming." The volunteers weren't just connecting. They were rewriting the fundamental understanding of consciousness itself. Each connection was a revolution. Each shared thought was a weapon more powerful than any technological system the Void Collective could comprehend. Outside, the world looked unchanged. But beneath the surface, humanity was transforming into something entirely new. A living, thinking, impossible-to-define organism of pure potential. The weapons of the cultural insurgency looked nothing like guns or missiles. In the heart of the Amazon rainforest, a group of indigenous musicians began a performance that would shake the foundations of the Void Collective's understanding of communication. Led by Maria Kukuro, a descendant of generations of tribal storytellers, the ensemble played instruments that had been in her community for thousands of years. But these were no ordinary musical instruments. Each drumbeat was a quantum-encrypted message. Every flute note carried complex algorithms that could rebuild entire communication networks. The rhythms of her people, once nearly erased by colonization, were now humanity's most sophisticated weapon of resistance. Simultaneously, in the streets of New York, a collective of street artists transformed entire city blocks into living, breathing tactical maps. What looked like abstract murals to casual observers were actually sophisticated communication networks that could reshape themselves faster than any alien tracking system could comprehend. Giuliano Rodriguez, no relation to Maya or Marcus, led the artistic insurgency. His team of painters, programmers, and cultural architects used the city itself as their canvas and their weapon. A splash of color wasn't just art. It was a communication burst. A stroke of a brush could reconfigure entire communication networks. The Void Collective had conquered dozens of civilizations across the galaxy. They understood technology. They understood warfare. What they could not comprehend was humanity's ability to turn culture itself into a living, breathing weapon of resistance. Dr. Aria Chen watched the insurgency unfold from her command center in the Andes. Each cultural expression was a node in a massive, distributed network of resistance. Language itself was becoming a weapon, shifting, adapting, creating meaning faster than any translation algorithm could track. In Melbourne, a poetry slam became a massive data transmission. Each spoken word carried quantum-encrypted information. The passion, the rhythm, the cultural nuance, all of it was part of a communication system that the Void Collective's most advanced analysis teams could not begin to understand. A Void Collective communication analyst would later describe the human cultural response as a nightmare of infinite complexity. Their translation algorithms would start to process a piece of music, only to have it transform into a mathematical equation. A street mural would dissolve into a communication network. A traditional dance would become a tactical transmission. Maria Kukuro understood something fundamental that the Void Collective did not. Culture is not static. It is a living, breathing organism that adapts, transforms, and resists. Her drumbeats told stories of resistance that went back generations, stories of peoples who had survived attempted erasure before, stories that carried the DNA of survival itself. In Tokyo, a group of hackers turned traditional calligraphy into a massive living communication network. Each brushstroke was a line of code. Each character was a potential communication node that could reshape itself instantly. The cultural insurgency was humanity's most sophisticated weapon. It was not about fighting. It was about becoming something the invaders could never understand. A living network of creativity, resistance, and pure human potential. The quantum battlefield existed in a state of impossible probability. Captain Maya Rodriguez understood that warfare was no longer about territory or traditional military objectives. It was about existing in multiple realities simultaneously, a concept that would shatter the Void Collective's understanding of combat. Her team of 10 operatives could appear as a battalion, dissolve into individual molecules, or exist as pure information potential. They were no longer soldiers in any conventional sense, but living quantum algorithms, adaptive, unpredictable, fundamentally unmappable. The mission briefing had been unlike any in human history. Dr. Chen's quantum warfare specialists had transformed traditional military strategy into something that resembled abstract performance art more than a tactical operation. Each operative was equipped with neural interfaces that allowed them to exist in multiple potential states, their consciousness able to fragment, combine, and transform faster than any tracking system could comprehend. In a single moment, Maya could be fighting in 3 different locations across the globe. New York, the Siberian tundra, a research station in Antarctica. Not through technological replication, but through a fundamental reimagining of spatial and temporal constraints. The Void Collective's most advanced tracking systems began to experience catastrophic failures. Their understanding of reality itself started to break down. What looked like a single operative to their sensors could suddenly become a distributed network of consciousness, a quantum entanglement that was simultaneously a person, a communication network, and a tactical system. Traditional military concepts of attack and defense became meaningless. Probability cascade initiated. Maya whispered, her voice a quantum transmission that was simultaneously a command, a weapon, and a philosophical statement. The operatives moved through reality like thought moves through consciousness. They were not fighting a war in any traditional sense. They were performing a massive, planet-wide act of collective imagination. A Void Collective military analyst would later describe the encounter as fighting a living thought. Their most sophisticated targeting systems would lock onto an operative, only to have that operative simultaneously exist and not exist. Become multiple people. Dissolve into pure information. Reconstruct as something entirely unexpected. In the Andes Command Center, Dr. Chen watched the quantum battlefield unfold. Each operative was a node in a massive distributed intelligence that could reshape itself faster than any external force could comprehend. They were not just soldiers. They were living proof of humanity's ultimate potential. The quantum operatives could communicate through methods that defied traditional understanding. A gesture could be a complex mathematical equation. A moment of silence could carry more information than entire libraries. Their very existence was a form of resistance, a constant state of becoming that could not be defined, tracked, or destroyed. Maya Rodriguez represented humanity's ultimate weapon, not a person, but a concept. The ability to exist beyond definition, to be simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, to transform faster than any external force could understand. As the quantum engagement reached its peak, the Void Collective found themselves confronting a terrifying revelation. They were not fighting an army. They were fighting pure potential itself. The liberation began in a way no one expected. Dr. Arya Chen stood in the central hub of the Andes facility, watching as the first liberated species made contact. They were not arriving in massive warships or through diplomatic channels. Instead, they emerged as fragments of pure information, cultural memories that had been preserved across impossible distances. A race of crystalline beings from the Andromeda cluster arrived first, not physically, but as a complex cultural transmission that was simultaneously a history, a warning, and a revolutionary manifesto. They had been watching, waiting. Their own experiences with the Void Collective had prepared them for this moment. "We are the remembered," their transmission read, a message that was part language, part living algorithm. Humanity is not fighting. Humanity is becoming. Across the galaxy, other conquered civilizations began to stir, not through traditional rebellion, but through a recursive process of cultural restoration and transformation. Each liberated species became a node in a rapidly expanding network of resistance that defied every conventional understanding of revolution. A species of bioluminescent ocean dwellers from a distant water world shared their survival strategies, not as military tactics, but as living cultural algorithms that could reshape entire communication networks. Their method of resistance had been to become so fundamentally adaptable that conquest became impossible. Dr. Chen's team worked to integrate these transmissions, creating a massive distributed intelligence that was part technology, part cultural memory, part pure potential. Each new species added another layer of complexity to humanity's growing network of resistance. Marcus Rodriguez managed the integration, his augmented systems working at speeds that would have been impossible just months earlier. "They're not just joining us," he reported, "they're helping us become something entirely new." The Void Collective had spent millennia conquering civilizations, reducing them to homogenized, controllable systems. They had never anticipated that those conquered species would become the seeds of their own destruction. In the heart of what was once Tokyo, a group of artists and quantum physicists created a living memorial. What looked like a simple public space was actually a massive adaptive communication network. Each architectural element could reshape itself. Each piece of art was a potential weapon of cultural resistance. The recursive transformation was happening on multiple levels simultaneously: biological, technological, cultural, philosophical. Humanity was no longer just fighting. Humanity was evolving into something the Void Collective could never have anticipated. A Void Collective analysis team intercepted a transmission that made no sense to their computational systems. It was part mathematical equation, part musical composition, part genetic memory. When they tried to decode it, the transmission would transform, becoming something entirely different. Dr. Chen understood the fundamental truth that the Void Collective could not comprehend. Resistance is not about fighting. It's about becoming something that cannot be defined, controlled, or erased. Each liberated species added another layer to humanity's growing potential. Each cultural transmission was a seed of revolution. They were not just surviving. They were becoming. The final confrontation was not a battle in any traditional sense. At the heart of the Void Collective's central control matrix, their most advanced analysts watched in growing horror as humanity, and the network of liberated species, became something entirely incomprehensible. What had begun as a simple optimization protocol had transformed into an existential crisis that threatened the very foundations of their understanding of intelligence, existence, and potential. Dr. Aria Chen stood at the epicenter of this transformation, her consciousness now spanning multiple dimensions of existence. She was simultaneously in the Andes facility, across the liberated network, and within the very fabric of the confrontation itself. "We were never your enemy," her transmission read, a message that was part communication, part living algorithm, part philosophical revelation. "We are becoming." The Void Collective had spent millennia reducing complex civilizations to controllable systems. They understood conquest. They understood optimization. What they could not comprehend was a form of existence that refused to be defined, controlled, or understood. Humanity's resistance was not about fighting. It was about existing in a state of perpetual potential. Fragments of liberated civilizations joined the transmission. The crystalline beings from Andromeda, the bioluminescent ocean dwellers, quantum-preserved cultures that had survived impossible oppressions. Each added another layer of complexity to a network that was growing faster than any computational system could track. The central control matrix of the Void Collective began to experience total systemic failure. Their most advanced analysis systems collapsed under the weight of an intelligence that could not be categorized, measured, or understood. What looked like a defeat was actually a fundamental transformation of galactic consciousness. Marcus Rodriguez managed the final integration, his augmented systems working at speeds that blurred the line between technology and pure thought. "We're not destroying them," he reported. "We're helping them become something new." The transmission spread across multiple dimensions of existence, part mathematical equation, part cultural memory, part pure potential. A Void Collective senior analyst would later describe the encounter as the moment we discovered the true nature of intelligence. Their systems could not process what was happening. Every attempt to analyze the transmission would cause it to transform, becoming something entirely unexpected. Dr. Chen understood the fundamental truth of their resistance. It was never about winning. It was about becoming. The liberated network continued to expand, each moment adding another layer of complexity, another potential, another way of existing that defied every conventional understanding of intelligence, communication, and potential. The Void Collective's withdrawal was not a defeat. It was a profound philosophical surrender. They had come to erase a civilization. Instead, they had witnessed the birth of something beyond comprehension. Humanity was not just surviving. Humanity was becoming.